Hello everyone, my name is Tania Peña and I will be doing my presentation on lack of enrollment and what is causing those low numbers with early childhood education programs. And my presentation was done as if I were to be talking to people in the community to advocate for early childhood education. So here it goes. Early childhood education. What is it and why is it important? Early childhood education focuses on the education of children from ages birth to 8 years. It helps children to develop the skills of social skills, which helps them to build relationships with their peers and adults, since we're teaching them respect not only for themselves but respect for others. They're also being taught manners and empathy to build those relationships. They're also growing emotionally. They're being taught self-confidence, self-regulation, and self-respect. These qualities help to build problem-solving skills. Physically, children are also learning those fine and gross motor skills, which we all need on a daily basis. Intellectually and academically, they're being taught early literacy and numeracy, which they will need once they go into kindergarten. Challenges early childhood education is facing in Fannin County. Like I mentioned before, it is the low enrollment numbers that could lead to federal funding cuts. Lack of awareness within the community about early childhood education is really affecting those numbers. A lot of people believe that early childhood education is another form of childcare. And since children do learn through play, a lot of people don't have that knowledge in regards to how children at that stage learn. And they believe that it's not a benefit that their children need, since it just doesn't focus all in the academic process. Then there's also the poverty within Fannin County. As of 2022, 12.49% of Fannin County residents live in poverty. That alone is about 4,127 people. And so far, that is what affects most of the little ones that are currently enrolled in childcare because of the instability that poverty does cause. Then there is the lack of resources, such as transportation. Within Fannin County, there is only one Head Start program, which is located in Bonham, Texas. Certain families cannot or will not travel twice a day to take their children to Head Start or preschool. The average distance between Bonham and the surrounding cities or towns is about 14.6 miles. Then the furthest town from Bonham is about 29.1 miles away from Bonham, and the closest two are actually 6 miles away. So parents would have to make that trip back and forth twice a day for 5 days a week. Unfortunately, not a lot of people have the means to go ahead and be able to do that. Then there is the effects that COVID-19 pandemic left behind, and one is inflation. Everything when it comes to the cost of living went up, and as well some jobs within the community did raise their pay to try to attract workers. The only difference is that when it comes to Head Start, they are still following federal guidelines, poverty guidelines when it comes to early childhood education. And since the pay did go up, not a lot of people do qualify to get that free tuition. Now, Fannin County demographics have an effect on the enrollment numbers. There is a lot of young parents who are unaware of such centers that provide early childhood education, and a majority of the children are being raised by grandparents and great-grandparents who are on a fixed income or may not have the means to necessarily take those children to and from the center. Then there's culture. A lot of I've heard from an enrollment specialist that a lot of Hispanics are hesitant when it comes to enrolling their 3-year-olds in the Head Start program, especially those where Spanish is the only language. They feel rather overwhelmed when it comes to the process and are not aware of the resources available to them in their own language. Now, if those numbers continue to remain low, it could mean federal funding cuts, and with those cuts, such school districts or programs or centers could be facing to make tough choices, such as reducing the amount of staff that they have on board. This leads to larger classes with the remaining teachers, and of course this decreases the one-on-one quality that each child gets. Then there's staff getting burned out, and that's only just a few to mention. Then there's early childhood education advocates that do speak to the community, like myself. Let me introduce myself. My name is Tanya, and I'm here speaking to you today to tell you a little bit more about early childhood education. As an employee of Bailey English Early Childhood Center, I can testify how crucial early education is. I have seen firsthand the hard work and dedication teachers and teachers' assistants put in every day, all for the benefit of the children and the community. Allow me to tell you a little bit more about Bailey English. Now, Bailey English, it's a Head Start and pre-kindergarten program that is available to children from ages 3 to 5 in Fannin County. Eligibility for free tuition is available. Children attend school from 7:30 in the morning all the way to 3 in the afternoon. Children receive free breakfast, lunch, and a snack. And there is 2 bilingual classes. Here is Bailey English at work. Here's one flyer that talks about that there is still some spots available for enrollment. If you are interested in getting your children enrolled, here is the number, the 903-583-8141. And Bailey English is located at 201 East 10th Street, Bonham, Texas. And their website is www.bonhamisd.org. I'm also going to be showing you a brief video that gives you just a little intel of Bailey English, and it's coming from the principal and the assistant principal. Okay, here it comes. And that was the video itself when it comes to a little bit about Bailey English. And again, thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, you can meet me after this presentation. And again, thank you for your time. And before I do let everybody go, I do have a couple of slides when it comes to who is employed at the Early Childhood Center of Bailey English, starting with, as you noticed in the video, the principal and assistant principal, Miss Kennedy and Miss Weaver, formerly known as, now that she's married, Mrs. Weaver, or Mrs. Curry. I'm sorry, I had to think about that name. Our counselor, Mrs. Pedrino. And of course, your parents do get two advocates that work one-on-one with them, answer any concerns that they might have, which is Mrs. Kaler and Mrs. Lopez. Then we have Mrs. Chavez, who is our enrollment specialist, and she is bilingual. Then you have your teachers, starting with Mrs. Aaron, Mrs. Alexander, Mrs. DeVore, Mrs. Ford, Mrs. Jones, Mrs. Lancaster, Mrs. McAdams, Miss Miller, Mrs. Masson, who's your health and safety coordinator. And then, of course, we have our bilingual teachers, Mrs. Hernandez and Mrs. Templeton. Again, if you have any questions, you can approach me after the presentation. Again, thank you for your time.